Democrats started calling illegal immigrants undocumented. It was so sudden, so judgmental, and without basis. To understand this altered perspective, you need to go into AsylumLand, the land where Obama created a fake humanitarian crisis. AsylumLand didn't happen in one day or with one executive order. It started with DACA, the Deferred Action Against Childhood Arrivals. With this executive order, Obama mandated that children who were brought to the U.S. illegally as children would not be deported and could receive right to work. Along with DACA, Obama created DAPA, which allowed the illegal parents of legal anchor children to stay and work in the U.S. These programs were stopped by the court through U.S. versus Texas. This case recognized several reasons DACA should be stopped, but one of the essential reasons was that the court determined that Obama was writing law. This was an overreach, as Congress is the only body authorized to write laws for the federal government. For quick clarification, a law is what Congress or a legislature writes. A regulation is created by an agency that is responsible for implementing the law. As it became increasingly clear that DACA was legally uncertain, Obama quietly released another executive order. This was the Central American Minors Act. This gave children from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador the right to apply for visas if they had a parent in the U.S. This was extraordinary for two reasons. First, these weren't just any visas. They were being given refugee visas. Generally, to come into the U.S., you must be sponsored, and there must be proof that you're not going to be a public burden. This order not only dismissed that concern, it offered the full gamut of all benefits available by both state and federal government. The administration also knew that statistically, benefits to refugees are a lifelong commitment. Second, and even more shockingly, this wasn't limited to children of the U.S. citizens or green card holders. It was for children of any parent lawfully in the U.S., which in Obama misspeak means something completely different. This is the actual definition. It shows Obama knowingly and willfully allowed illegal aliens with children in these countries to bring their kids here as refugees and grant them unlimited permanent benefits. These benefits include cash payments they receive to get by until full benefits kick in. But to say he allowed illegals to get benefits doesn't highlight the truth of what happened here. He allowed illegals that had fought the whole process and finally ordered deported by a judge to bring in their kids if they were able to even get a temporary deferral of the order. A feigned illness could have accomplished this. If they were in any phase of the deportation process, they could bring them in. If another court or order mandated deportation, shown here as enforced deportation, they could bring them. Now think what that means. If a criminal court had ordered it, a family court, think domestic abuse, or if mandated deported, when released from prison, that was okay. They could still bring their kids as refugees while in this process. Parolees were permitted. A parolee is someone who is neither legal or illegal. They're here illegally, but for humanitarian reasons are allowed to stay and wait till a visa becomes available. Obama even allowed people whose removal is on a temporary hold, meaning if there's a court order for deportation, but they're too sick to travel, they can apply from their publicly subsidized hospital bed. So essentially, the only ones not lawfully here were those in custody with no appeals left or are already on a bus without a pen. As mentioned in slide 7, parolees are someone with no legal status but are allowed to stay in the U.S. while they waited for a visa to become available or for a change in status. CAM allowed these children to apply for parole when they weren't even in the U.S. Not only is parole for those on U.S. soil, it exists to provide relief under such exceptional circumstances it would be inhumane to deny it. They provided this in response to an executive order, not for humanitarian relief, wasn't even a consideration. Because this regulatory speak, the extent of the wrongdoings aren't always immediately clear. Here they are stating clearly their intent to defy our regulatory directive. Remember that regulations are created to implement the laws created by Congress. The summary here is they're breaking the law. The law allows the agency to grant parole when a court has ruled an immigrant illegally in the U.S. can receive a visa when one comes available, essentially a visa IOU. The immigrant status while waiting for the visa is known as parole. This status is important because, though it's temporary, they are now legal and it entitles them to the rights and benefits in the U.S. So not only is this agency granting parole to those not court-placed on a waiting list, they're granting parole to those applying for visas and not even in the country. It defies reason to believe that every application would result in a visa. So why were they breaking the law and knowingly granting parole to illegals that would never be eligible for visas? Oh, that's right. If from Central America, they could bring their children in as refugees. As we mentioned, the visas we're looking at here are special immigrant visas. They're for special humanitarian cases and are sometimes referred to as SIV, SIJV juvenile, or U unclassified. The number was expanded to 10,000 after the Iraqi invasion and allowed up to 5,000 visas annually for Iraqi and 2,500 for Afghani nationals that helped our troops. The Obama administration, as you can see, regularly gave less than 1% of the available visas to the intended recipients, yet his use of visas spiked. This spiked because he used it for CAM and probably for DACA. He didn't stop at annual allocation of visas. He determined that the unallocated visas carried over to the next year and began issuing the unissued refugee visas en masse. Now this is probably the first you've heard of this program. Do you think the people from Central America got the news? This chart shows they heard it very clearly. In 2014, 95% of all unaccompanied children were from the 3 targeted countries. Being that leading Democrats weren't in the know and complicit, they began calling them undocumented, not illegal. Based on this program, the Democrats were right, but their real status was parole. They didn't describe them this way because it would have exposed their illegal abuse of the visa program. As the numbers of flowing over the border increased, the Obama administration feigned total ignorance as to the cause. Here, Health and Human Services attributes the influx to violence and poverty in their home countries. There is no mention of the executive order, so it's passive denial of Obama's role and begins the narrative of these immigrants up as refugees. In the lower section, HHS reviews the extensive measures taken to deter immigrants and secure the border. This is an outright lie. The administration knew that the children coming in had the legal right to enter based on Obama's executive order. While this was represented as a humanitarian crisis, the administration knew that at least 85% and likely closer to 95% of all children were being placed with parents or direct family members. In this excerpt, HHS highlights the $912 million spent to place 58,000 children with their own parents currently in the United States. In the lower excerpt, HHS acknowledges a dispute exists with the use of visas in foster care. Apparently, someone with integrity exists and argues children coming to meet their parents shouldn't receive refugee visas or qualify for foster care. As the majority of children are receiving SIJV visas, it's reasonable to assume they're also in foster care. The fact that the overwhelming majority are living with parents raises more questions. If children were given status in their home countries to meet parents in the U.S., who knew they were coming? Why did the administration portray children as placed? Was giving them status as placed a surreptitious way to provide benefits? This chart on placement shows at least 91% live with direct family, yet the next chart shows 86% have some level of foster care placement, with 48% in full foster care. Almost 10% are in therapeutic foster care, which is the most expensive level of foster care. Before I address what foster care means in dollars, remember that at the same time Obama was providing this, he implemented a new tax structure that raised taxes altogether and wiped out most family deductions. Foster care is first, paid for by the state, and second, very expensive. In New York, where many of the kids went, a foster family is compensated anywhere from $29,000 to $123,000 per child per year. The compensation typically comes as a $1,700 a month plus expenses. Now, as this is essentially a reimbursement, the majority of this money is not coming in as income, so it's tax-free and doesn't impact access to other benefits. The difference in compensation has to do with the needs of the child. So a child with a disability, think that 10% in therapeutic care, will be at the high end. The largest percentage of student loan defaults are by older Americans. These are old loans. These are parents who co-signed and can't afford the payments. While American parents are buckling under student loan debt, these families are getting full benefits, compensated up to $123,000 to keep their own children, and are reimbursed 100% for food, clothing, medical, tuition, car, housing costs, utility bills, sheets, bedding, clothing, etc. This is just a glimpse into how expensive a fake humanitarian crisis can be. We've been told that over 70,000 refugees have come in from the Middle East, yet the CAM program was over 30% more expensive. Those refugees were supposedly a larger number and didn't have families waiting. The other is a small snapshot of the grant size that the nonprofits involved in resettlements receive. Remember, this is one grant of many from one agency of many. These are the public benefits the refugees receive, though not in the chart. CAM children are provided free attorneys, and their housing and education costs are paid until age 24. As shown in the chart, as refugees come in, the benefit rolls increase. SNAP, which is food, is nearly 100%. It indicates increasing dependence with no indication in 5 years that they're moving towards independence. The administration made sure to promote enthusiasm for the refugee migrant children. The Department of Education reimburses funding-starved school districts nearly 150% of the costs incurred by school districts. For children with learning or language delays, the costs would easily exceed $75,000 per immigrant student. As Obama believed that DACA would be revived, or lawmakers wouldn't have the political will to overturn it, they encouraged as many to come into the states as possible. Continued presence was a necessary component under DACA and humanitarian visas, so the immigrants had to apply to establish it. Here they are given instructions on the process. Significant on this page is that the applicants are clearly getting state benefits and that the administration was still calling them victims. Remember that the LEPB is the sole agency approving these refugee applications. If you think Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the LEPB is the guy handing out the golden ticket. Their approval is necessary for immigrants who have been placed on a visa wait list in the U.S. to get legal status and benefits. Now this slide probably is meaningless to you, and yet it's one we should have the strongest reaction to. As we saw, the LEPB must approve the paroled immigrant before they can receive their visa-free money card for life. Before 2010, the LEPB had to receive input from ICE, the FBI, and the DEA before they can approve an immigrant. After 2010, that requirement was removed. They removed vetting, let alone extreme vetting. We wish we could say this program has ended, but clearly it hasn't. Recently, we read that the U.S. was obligated to take nearly 3,000 migrants that Australia believed to be dangerous to take in exchange for refugees in the United States. What the news refused to cover was that the immigrants were exchanging for weren't even in the U.S. Obama opened a refugee camp in Costa Rica under the pretense of people fleeing violence in Central America, and it still exists. So you ask, why would we obligate ourselves to non-Americans in non-crisis to such a degree that we relocate and shelter them? Because Obama expected his fake humanitarian crisis to grow. As of now, though, it's not clear how many are in this camp and how many are expected to come in here. But let's hope this administration puts an end to it.